Benjamin Bischoff. Go to your right. So, Benjamin.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well.
100%.
And I hope you can see those slides.
Yeah, 100%.
Perfect. So we are at 200%. So this one is called The Road to QA, an okay-ish success story. Funnily enough, in the schedule, it's called a pretty okay success story, but okay-ish is actually correct because I did this talk before and I got a feedback from someone giving me like 3 or 5 stars and saying that was an okay-ish success story. And I liked it so much that I kept it in the title. Okay, that's me, Benjamin Bischoff, test automation engineer at Trivago in Germany. I've been in IT for about 23 years, and the last 8 I spent in test automation. Before that, I was 100% developer. And I also wrote a book for people who are interested, writing API tests with karate. Just throwing this out there as a shameless plug. But this talk is not about this. It's also not about bragging, and this is important to me. Why am I doing this? Because I just want to share my story, how I got into IT, and how I finally became a test automation engineer. I'm not doing that to tell you how great I am. I'm doing that to inspire you to do the same, because I know everybody here in this room and online probably has a story like this to tell. So for me, it's all around this question: do I want to keep doing what I'm doing? And I think everyone in the IT business has asked him or herself that before. And for me, this question came after 15 years of developing software, but I'll get to that. So let's go back a little to see how I actually started. And it all started with a Commodore C64. Maybe some people listening in have a similar memory. A friend of mine in school had this Wonder Machine. You used it to play games on your TV, but what it could also do is interpret basic code. And I don't know how it was in other countries, but in Germany, we had those computer magazines that had those basic listings printed, so you could type them into your C64, and then you could make a ball bounce around on the screen or something exciting along those lines. And that was really, really fascinating. So I was super happy when my father decided to buy a PC for my family. It was a 82, 86 machine. I have very fond memories of this. It had a 20 megabyte hard drive. Megabyte. So less than 20 floppy disks. But I used that to actually start my career because I had this spark from the C64 basic experiments. So I continued with QBasic. Maybe some of you remember. And many people at school also started this just for fun. And we were swapping disks around on the schoolyard, just showing off what we did, our new basic programs. And then came a turning point for me. I was an exchange student in Michigan, USA. And you see me there with my host brother in front of a PC. He was very much into programming as well. But more than that, the person on the right, Mrs. Helen Gallup, who sadly passed away a few years ago, she was a programming teacher, and she was my major inspiration to continue this path. That was 1995, 96. When I got back to Germany from this long trip, was 10 months, I started playing around with PHP because I heard you could do cool things with it. I had no idea about web development at that point. And also, I started trying out Flash with a friend of mine who was an illustrator, still is. And he said he heard about this program that you could do illustrations, but also do games. So we approached this together from two different angles, him from the graphical side and me from the coding side. And that taught me a little bit about teamwork and how to structure projects. So not really big projects, but very small experiments we did. But this turned out to be a very good decision to try this. So inspired from all the programming stuff and the USA trip, I wanted to really pursue this IT career. And I did what's called a vocational training in 1999 in Germany, which is part school and part working in a real company. And the whole thing is called IT Specialist for Application Development. It's a little more complicated to say in German. Um, and the company I was working at mainly did web development, telecommunications, Crystal Reports, which was a solution to do reports from databases and data warehouses, really boring stuff. But because I did some PHP experiments before on my own, I could make websites for customers because that's when they offered making websites. And this was my first encounter with customers and how hard it can be to work for customers. And then in 2001, there was the bankruptcy of the company I was working at. Fortunately, I was able to finish this vocational training, but this was quite a shock that early in my career that this can happen. And I learned very early that you shouldn't rely only on formal education, but do some side projects like the PHP and the Flash project, because this enabled me to go on. And I landed my first real job because of this. As a web and Flash developer at a web agency. Funnily enough, this agency, my friend with the C64 was also working there, and he was the one who told me about this opportunity. And there, because we were juggling multiple clients, I learned about teamwork, I learned more about organization, and I also learned about documentation and how important this can be, especially when you have to tell the clients what you did and how much it costs. And 2 years later, this happened. So there was yet another bankruptcy. At this point, I was wondering if it was me who was causing this, because so far every company I worked at was bankrupt 2 years later. And this is the first time when this question actually came up. Do I want to keep doing what I'm doing? Because this was shocking twice. So I took this decision to become a freelancer. And yeah, it looks like perfect freedom, but it was actually not that easy. Um, because of this web and Flash experience that I had, I decided to be a self-employed web and Flash developer and work with customers directly. And this was really, really, really hard for me because I'm not that good in communication, or at least I didn't used to be that good. I had to do way more organization. I had to deal with taxes and writing bills and things like that, but also in terms of technology, making my code reusable, because I had to use that for different clients to save time. But still, I did that for about 6.5 years, and that actually taught me a lot. This is a this is a fun project I did with the friend, with the Illustrator friend. We did that in Flash and PHP. Again, because of the side projects we were doing together, we were able to offer real browser games. And this was actually rather successful. It was a game where you could choose an egg, dress it up, and then send it uh, into the ring to fight against other eggs. It's not online anymore. And then again, because of what I've done before with the freelancing and the game development, I ended up in the gaming industry. I won't tell you the company, but you can probably guess from this picture. And this was actually my last freelance project I did. And then they offered me to be the front-end lead for a browser game. I think that was during the time when Farmville was around and was very, very, very successful on Facebook. So they wanted to do something similar, but a little bit too late. But still, I had the chance to work in a real game and in a larger team. It was about 15 people, and we had to coordinate the front end and the back end right there on the spot, something I have never done before. I've never worked with this many people before. And this was also the first time I started working with QA, because we had two QA people there. And frankly, we viewed them as necessary evil. And I'm not proud of that. But one time I remember there was a bug, and us developers decided to keep it in the code base because it was hard to fix, and said if QA doesn't find it, then we don't have a bug. Not proud of it, wouldn't do that again. This was the game, was called The Settlers My City. It was not very successful, I have to say, because it just was way too late. But still, I think it looked nice. And again, it was scrapped. The company still exists. It was not a bankruptcy, but the game was shut down roughly 2 years later. Again, 2 years, always 2 years, and then something crumbles. But this had a good aspect again, because I was transferred to a tools and services team in the same company, and we made tools for other game teams to manage their live operation games. This is when I got started with real serious Java development and client server architecture, writing lots of documentation, working for the first time with big QA teams in other countries and taking them seriously this time. And also my first experience with testing, unit integration and functional testing mainly. But what's more important, my first encounter with Selenium. And yes, I know Selenium gets a lot of bashing at the moment, especially on LinkedIn. But for me, it is still the best solution for browser testing. But this would be another talk. The important part is that I found this super magical to watch a browser test in Selenium. Like it was just magical to see that, and I wanted to do more of that. But sadly enough, there was no real test automation career path. There was the QA career path that mainly consisted of what some people would call manual work, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep programming. So I asked myself again, Do I want to keep doing what I'm doing? And the answer was no. I wanted to be in test automation. And I found this job offer here at my current company, Trivago, for a test automation engineer. And of course, what do? You look online to see if it's a good idea to go from development into QA. And there were some opinions, most of them were against this. The worst one, I think, was the one at the bottom. Sorry, but switching to QA from dev is career suicide. You can tell yourself whatever lie you want and convince yourself that it's the right choice, but you'll eventually realize it's a bad decision. So, yeah, I read all this and decided for myself, don't listen to the internet and do it. And luckily, I was chosen to do this job. And I became a test automation engineer in a release and test automation team. And we were a central team for the maintenance and development for the test automation framework and the pipelines, and just promote this idea of test automation in the company. And I still think it's a good idea to go from dev to QA, because you have so much knowledge sharing, you have so much change of perspective when you come from coding to have suddenly this view of quality. You get to know the application under test super well. QA generally knows who does what. They have the right communication channels to all the teams. And I found new appreciation for QA, and that is a necessary part of the software development lifecycle. It also taught me a lot about communication, because we had to align on what features would be needed for testing, get a sense of the pain points that the current test approach had, and just develop the processes together and, in general, enable easier exploratory testing through the help of tools. And excuse me while I'm rushing through this, but I realize we don't have too much time because we started a little later. Just bridging the gap, being a link between developers and QA, that is the main thing. Because as a test automation engineer, you can sometimes translate between development and QA. And we had this situation first when I joined called the Triangle of Doom, when we had the quality assurance team and the development team who had a super good relationship already. And then us test automation people came in and we didn't have that relationship. We had a lot of bias. Nobody knew what this test automation stuff should do. People were afraid we wanted to take away jobs. And this all changed when we changed the team setup. We integrated the test automation engineers into the QA team. That was, I think, 6 years ago when we did that. We still have that. That proved to be a super good decision to have a healthy relationship between dev and QA. And also, working in QA really improved my coding, because I do more coding than ever before. I work with a test framework, I work with pipelines, I work with cloud technology. So lots and lots of stuff to do. Also, there's this aspect of open source development, which is super cool, because this is one of the projects the test automation team started, which was a reporting library for Cucumber tests. This thing is called Clucumber, and it is still available online today. And tests are code. And tests need maintenance, tests need bug fixes, tests need refactoring, code reviews, tests need testing. So all of that is part of the normal software development lifecycle, but it also applies to test code itself. And yeah, as I said, working in QA has improved my coding skills. This is not that important for now. I can tell you that I went back to my former company because they offered um, an automation engineer job. And I thought, this is a sign if my company from before, where I loved working, offers a similar job, I should take it. But I realized a lot had changed in the gaming industry and it just was not for me. And the biggest takeaway from that for me was if you hit an obstacle, if you work in a company that doesn't value what you do, you should quit. Of course, you should only quit if you have an alternative in sight, but if you can, quit. And that's what I did. Because, as I said, I wasn't valued. The company culture wasn't good. There were no learning opportunities. There was no career path. Lots of things went wrong. And that's when I remembered it was only 5 months. I remembered my old connections from my company, from my current one, Trivago. And this is one of the biggest learnings I had from that. Maintain your connections when you leave. Because then I got to go back as a test automation engineer again. This time in backend, which was scary because I've never worked as a backend test automation engineer before. But this was actually a cool decision because now I could do something completely new again. And still, I'm embedded into the core QA team as before, but just with another focus, with a backend focus this time. And I want to give you just a few of the key learnings because we're running out of time. The biggest one for me was don't be afraid to question things, not only when it comes to the solutions you build or the approaches you take, but also the career path you're taking. And don't be afraid to question your current job. Yeah, listen to your users. Across all my career, being a freelancer, being in other companies, working together with QA, always listen to your users and their pain points. Never stop learning is a given. Never stop communicating is even more important. And in terms of QA, I learned that everyone is responsible for quality and QA is not the only one. And with this, thanks a lot. And I hope it was not too much in a short time, but I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Leona, for more than okayish. Very nice from you. So I'm not sure how it works now, if there is a Q&A or if I just go through the chat. But thanks a lot for your kind words in the chat. Oh, can you tell more about the Clucumber plugin? Yes, I can. Clucumber is a library that you can use either as a Maven plugin or in core Java code. There are two flavors of it, and it works with Cucumber JSON files. So you can use it with any Cucumber-based test framework, but you can also use it with the Karate framework because it also writes the Cucumber JSON format. So, if there are no other questions, thanks again for having me,